error occurred. So,
I'm
check,
seeing
check.
us live,
Oh,
so
excellent. Good. Again,
yeah.
it's just my computer. Every time. Welcome to the Gundam Explained podcast show live. But really, right before we went on, I was explaining to Stephen about my computer blue screened right before. And this show has been known to have those technical difficulties, which is pretty
Oh,
funny.
yeah.
And I think, though, after all this time, a couple years, I'm starting to think maybe it's just OBS, and I need to. I don't know. We'll figure it
I
out.
I think it's definitely just you and I in general because, I mean,
That's true.
like, honestly, this was a much smoother start than yesterday's show
Oh,
where
that's right.
I mean, I had my, mason jar full of water and just yeeted it across the
That's funny. If you
room.
guys haven't watched that, now I'm introducing Steven, but if you guys haven't watched, check out yesterday's show. That was pretty funny. He had a planned thing at the beginning and it went all wrong, but that's what kind of makes these
Yeah.
fun, you know?
And it would've been fine, I think, if I hadn't hit, like, the go live right as it happened, because then it's
Yeah,
like, how do you do it? Like,
I
what?
know.
It's just
I love that setup. I love it. Well, but it's funny because it reminds me of maybe when you're going on a date with someone.
oh,
Sometimes
yeah.
it's like when you're nervous, you just go to a movie, dinner, but it's more interesting if something happens, like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
if it rains on you guys or
yeah,
something,
exactly.
um
So let's see what happens here. Hopefully, it doesn't rain on my equipment. It flooded that one time. Well, no, anyway.
well,
Anyway, yeah,
twice.
welcome to the podcast. Yeah, the Gundam Explain show. We'll be talking about Gundam. That's kind of what we do here. But sometimes we don't, so that's not 100% accurate. A lot of times video games, movies, news, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for today's episode, we're going to talk about a bunch of things, but one main topic in particular is, the Robot Spirits Blue Destiny stuff I've been covering on my channel. But they're coming out with a newer action figure. So we'll get to that here shortly. It's of a character from Blue Destiny.
Sweet.
And then, there's not much else. I know that there's not much in terms of news really when it comes to Gundam, although they did announce Singapore is going to get the theatrical release of Seed. What is it called? Freedom.
Seed freedom.
Eh,
Actually, did you hear the news, and I'm not sure if we covered this yet, there are Steam pre-orders for, Gundam Breaker 4?
Oh, but like on Steam right now, you can pre-order it.
Or, yeah, wish listed or whatever, like, the
Oh, okay. I'm
terminology.
glad you
I'm not a
brought this
Steam
up.
guy.
I'm glad you brought this up because I actually wanted to touch on that real quick. The thing is, though, and maybe this is how it goes, but there's no physical pre-order for the Steam version, which sure I get it, but
Yeah.
this time though it comes with the Gunpla.
Right, so how do you
So I'm wondering, so I would get it on Steam, but I think I'm going to have to pre-order the special edition on like PlayStation or Switch and then get the digital code on Steam.
yeah.
But it's like on one hand, I would be like, I want to be able to buy a physical one on Steam. But on the other hand, it's like I get it. By now, with the PC gaming side of things, I don't think there would be a good enough ROI on a physical good for a Gundam
Digital.
PC game.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
probably not. And, I guess it kinda begs the question, like, I is the Epic's game store, like, even is it financially solvent? Like, if you have games that are being produced in Unreal Engine and they're going to Steam instead of the Epic Game Store, and we're not,
Yeah.
you know, depending on the studio, right? Like, it makes sense. Like, I'm sure a lot of indie guys would rather go Steam than Epic, but,
Yeah.
like, for a company like Bandai and the devs, I think which company is developing, uh, GB4?
Well, yeah, it's a team within the Bandai Namco, like because they
Yeah.
have these different teams. And I'm not sure. It's not like a third party or an outside.
Okay, so it's not like
Yeah.
Art Dink or one of those,
Oh,
or
right.
like
Yeah.
DB Studio.
Yeah. Actually, I see what you're talking about. Yeah. Let me see if I can look that up.
But yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's surprising to me because typically you would imagine that a larger company would go with the Epic Game Store.
yeah. So it's very interesting what's going on because again, they have the Steam release. They're not having an Xbox release, but they could have an Xbox release that's Play Anywhere. So then it would be on PC anyway.
Right.
What they did, and so I My thought, okay, so the developer is Crafts and Meister. Never heard of them.
Not familiar?
They're pretty much a breaker developer. I guess they're the ones but you know, it's interesting because I think this game was made right before kind of the first like little bubble burst or crash of the video game industry about a year ago when all these games started getting pushed, like even Zelda being one of
Yeah,
them. So this game suffered that. So it could have been it was in development long enough ago that they weren't thinking in terms of like SD Gundam Battle Alliance or even Gundam Evolution,
yeah,
y- so that could be what it is. But yeah, the thing with Epic is very interesting because I heard so for games to be exclusive on Epic, those developers slash publisher will get paid. And so it works
yeah.
out for them. But Epic actually doesn't make anything off their store. Their store is more of a means to slowly start, getting people in that direction, especially that are doing development
Yeah.
and then having Fortnite in there. So there's that crossover of development going into Fortnite, develop something.
I think that that's the same sort of, model as, like, Unity, for instance. Unity makes more money off of people buying Unity assets for game
Yeah.
development than they do off of the game developers themselves, and I think the Epic Game Store is similar, where it's, like, people buying assets to use in Unreal projects earns them more money than
Yeah.
actually making games.
Yeah, it's interesting, and yeah, I can plug this on the Blue Gamer YouTube channel. I posted a video yesterday where I kind of deep dived into like the industry, what's going on, especially toxicity online, and how it's almost like linked in some way. But I really do think right now, and I could even include myself, even though I say I think I know a lot, we don't really know what's going on with the industry because
No.
I think it's large enough now that there's pockets of markets that I think it's smarter for publishers, developers to market to instead of trying to get everything. So it's that right now we're at that point where, and I think Helldivers 2 is a good example because that is selling like a mass marketed title,
Yeah.
even though it wasn't made to be that. So I think we're going to see a lot of interesting things. And actually, that's part of what I wanted to talk about next, because we like to talk about video games here a lot. So,
We do.
Sony and EA just had some layoffs. So
Yeah.
not only did Sony lay off 900, but they canceled the next Twisted Metal game, among other games. I don't know them all exactly. EA had layoffs and canceled the Respawn first person shooter Star Wars game, which is crazy because that seemed like a surefire
And look at all the Lucasfilm remasters coming out now, like
Dark
Dark
Forces.
Forces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, a lot of people are viewing the layoffs as, like, the video game industry being in danger, but, in your video on Blue Gamer, like, I have to say, you hit the nail on the head, it's these overinflated budgets, and I think
Yeah.
that the reason that the budgets are so high is that you have a lot of people working in the industry that probably shouldn't be,
Yeah.
and so the overhead is so high because you're paying a bunch of employees to do nothing. And, say what you will about like Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, the fact that the website's still working after laying off almost all of the staff
Yeah.
is evidence that like maybe all of our, I would say that sort of in every industry,
Yeah.
companies are over hiring because they're trying to fill seats and not necessarily because there's a demand for the labor that it needs to be done.
Exactly. They want to be set up in order to then be able to deliver on multi-million dollar projects, billion-dollar projects. And there's no more evidence for that than look at what Nintendo did when they were faced with decisions. Their CEO took a pay cut instead of laying people off. So
Yeah.
just that fact alone, and to see how this kind of mirrors what happens in Hollywood, I believe between Hollywood and the video game industry, it's executive level people that want that bigger pay for a project thinking,
Mhm.
okay, well then let's just make sure this makes a lot of money. So let's try to let's inflate our income or our paycheck, but make sure that the game makes money then or the movie. And it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah.
And and that's why I that's another reason why I think they do this is because sometimes the numbers are there and it's obvious. It's like, okay, we don't need to do this to make this game,
Right.
but it's like they do it anyway. And it's then they lose, it's like the Madam Web movie. Like
exactly.
It's like, why even make it? Wha
It yeah.
it doesn't make sense. Someone wanted to get paid,
I
you know?
and I bring this up a lot when it comes to, like, video game adaptations and movies and live action adaptations, is I'm always like, you really have to, at your core, say, like, "Who is this for?" Like, "Who is the audience for this
Yeah,
project?" Because if it's fans of the original thing and you're gonna implement all of these changes in it, then the fans of the original thing aren't gonna appreciate it. And, if you're making it for a new audience, then they're not going to go back to the old franchise and revisit it. So it's like and I always bring up the Sonic example because of Fat Robotnik,
oh,
and
yeah.
it actually warms my heart a little that Jim Carrey was like, "No, I wanna be Fat Robotnik, like, put me in
Yeah,
a suit," kinda thing.
yeah, I love
But,
that.
like, for a kid and those movies are fantastic, like, they're kind of an exception to the rule,
Right?
but,
Yeah,
if I were a kid that was just getting into Sonic for the first time through these movies, and then I hop in and try to play the old Genesis games, I'd be like, "Who is that guy?
yeah,
Why doesn't he look like Jim Carrey?" You know what I mean? So it's like, even and that's where it's like, I don't wanna get into, like, the culture war, brain rot type discussion about it. Even just small changes, like visual changes like that,
yeah.
they can have a huge impact.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and that reminds me of, like, the Halo show. Because it has some cool action this season, I then with my son, we were watching an episode, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, this is kinda boring." Even the talking, even for me, this is very, like, boring fluff stuff, like, I'll fast forward, and we went through 2 episodes, and there was barely any action. The most action there was
Within that first episode.
no, it was I think this was the 3rd episode, but it was, eh, Master Chief, but in his
Yeah.
civilian clothing, running around the street shooting. And it just like, "Okay, is this Halo?" And so it's those things, yeah, there's
Where's John Halo?
it's these interesting decisions that happen, which
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, yeah, it's like, yeah, we were talking earlier how it was a Japanese publisher executive that said, yeah, nowadays the people that are hired for management positions in these developers and publisher studios are people being hired for their executive management and not that they know how to make a game or how games are made.
And not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that because, like, you definitely need people that have,
Oh,
like,
yeah, that skill
delegation
set too.
skills.
Yeah.
Simon Sinek talks about this all the time where it's like when you promote within your company, if you promote someone who's really good at doing a job and then they're responsible for people who used to do the or that do the job that that person used to do, that doesn't mean that they're qualified to actually manage the people. So they actually need
Yeah.
leadership training in order to be able to facilitate people doing stuff. So it's like you need a balance of people that, like, are good people managers, and then you also need talented,
Yeah.
artists. And, you just get this bloat of, like, middle managers that just kinda sit around and don't do anything. Maybe they fill out reports and say, like, "Well, we're halfway through our roadmap that we published on the website, so we must be doing a good job." And it's like, "But you didn't do anything." And I think I
Yeah.
mentioned this when I beat Code Fairy. I'm, like, looking through the credits, and I'm like, there are I think there were, like, 25 social media managers associated with just Code Fairy, and I'm like, imagine if they
Yeah.
had a staff like Helldivers, where it's
Oh, yeah.
like a limited staff that just is everyone's all hands on the project and not like all of these kind of vacuous roles that don't really contribute to the product being good.
Yeah, and then they
Because
started hiring to then where gaps would be. They're like, "Okay." And
yeah,
and I think it was like server people, and they were even talking about how they were like, "Hey, hang tight because as we're hiring these server people, we're also training them in how to use the tools." And it's like, that's cool they're being that transparent and they are working in that direction. A lot of times once a game is released, it's like, "Okay, now we're doing the layoffs of all the QA
yeah,
or whatever." But this, it was, they didn't have to. And
yeah,
yeah, and so this kind of goes to this other thing. You and I have like this passion for video games, especially game development. You've done a lot of that actually, and I think this just gives more room for indie games to shine because like
yeah,
there's so many independently game or just small studio made games that get lost easily, even if they're really good. But I
yeah.
think what we might see in the next year or two, probably even longer than that. If they're canceling games right now that were gonna come out in a year or 2, I think we're gonna give room for the smaller studios to stick out.
Yeah, and I think like you said, a lot of people are trying to go for mass market, and, like, that's where AAA games get this overinflated budget, they get the scope creep, the feature creep, because they're trying to capture as many dollars as possible because they want to appeal to as many people as possible,
Yep.
when the truth is, like with Helldivers, if you target a specific person, you're like, "I'm gonna make a game for this person," then everyone who's like that person's going to enjoy that game. As opposed to when you try to cram as many features into a game as possible in order to please a lot of people, then you end up taking every individual person that would like a piece of that game, and now they don't like it.
And yeah,
Because
and it's the
'cause it's like,
same
maybe
thing.
I don't want a crafting system, or I don't want, like,
Yeah, a
you know.
grind element, yeah, and it's the same thing that's going on with Hollywood and with those
Yeah,
big movies. It's like they're trying to make that appeal to the log and that also just it's almost like we're proving our points just by bringing up Hollywood and the video game industry. It's
yeah,
they're both going through this, and we're seeing, like, things like Batgirl getting canceled even though it's done. The Looney Tunes with John Cena movie, that sounded awesome, but they canceled that, and
yeah.
it's yeah, it's very interesting to see it again, it's the economy. This is this bounce back after COVID. But again, it was being irresponsible. Low margins in the first place. COVID happens. Then after that, they're doubling down. And then again, it's,
Yeah, and I hope that there starts to be a similar trend in Hollywood where, they're gonna scale down the budgets and try to appeal to specific, like you said, subsets of the market instead of trying to, you know
and I think so because like A24, I think is a good example of who's kind of leading that. And
Yep,
Blumhouse also, like they're making
mhm,
these like genre movies or very interesting movies with low budgets, but they end up doing good. And yeah, I think we just need to see a lot more of that. And I think we will. Uh, yeah, I
yeah,
think it's just a matter to turn around. But
and that's part of the thing about, like, AI tools is I think AI tools kind of they're not going to replace creatives because I don't think that you really can,
mhm.
and we talked a bit about this yesterday. I think what it does is it democratizes access to these types of tools and, like, democratizes the ability for an individual to create on the same scale as, like, a big studio.
Oh, and like I think it was yesterday when you were talking about CGI being used to fix things. That's kind of like where AI is really gonna come in. It's gonna help like sharpen those edges that
Yeah.
of like where okay we need an AI tool to kind of help process this or that and yeah but speaking of video games, the other thing I wanted
Oh,
to
yeah.
get to, I think I had mentioned I beat Order of Ecclesia, that
Yes.
Castlevania game, and then the Metroid game. I've been playing Portrait of Ruin, which was the Castlevania game that came out right before that. It was a DS one, and
Yeah.
that one is amazing. It's a lot easier only because like playing both of those back to back. Order of Ecclesia was really all about the grinding.
Yeah, I
Like
was gonna say, so this one's
it,
not a grind fest.
it's not. It's more of when you level up, you are just that much more powerful. Like it almost I appreciate it because at first I thought, okay, well, this is a little too easy, but I'm like, no, actually, it's being respectful of my time. I like where I can. It's a good pace. Like I would rather spend my time on the bosses than just grinding through the world to be powerful enough to then get um, and again, it's making me think more about when I make my game, what I want it to look like. I like that it's a Metroidvania where you can control two characters at once. So,
That's
like,
pretty
as you're
sweet.
attacking, the other one's attacking. So, you want to give them all the gear you find. But then at any time, you could press a button to make it just you or just them. But then
Nice.
also, there's a command for them to like wait places or help you push stuff. And I was like, you know what? That's really cool. Like, think of a Metroidvania with a party system.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you can like there's certain attacks where I have to use one character or another. And I was like, wow, if they can expand on that, what if you had a party of characters like five that you
Yeah.
could play a side-scrolling exploration game,
That'd be pretty cool, and,
Yeah.
like, I'm a big fan of, like, the BioWare model, like, Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect, where you have, like, maybe you got, like, 9 characters on your ship that you can choose from, but you can only take 2 of them with you at any given time, so that
Oh,
way it's
that
like
is cool. Like
so
I've
so it
never
gives you an element of, like, tactical optimization for whatever
for a
task you're
mission
trying to
or
do.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I never really played the BioWare games much, only because I think they were rooted in RPG, and I do know they got more open with their gameplay later on,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I mean, everyone says good things about Mass Effect, and I have never it just I think and that's the thing, I think I played the demo of one of them once, and I didn't like the controls, but that wasn't the point of the game, right? Because
Right.
it's more about the story, it's just more accessible controls for combat, but
Yeah, I think and that was like so my wife has 2 favorite games, Mass Effect
oh,
2 and the Resident Evil 2 remake. Well, and Breath of the Wild, I would say, is now her
oh,
number
wow.
3.
Good games.
But she was like because Mass Effect 1, the combat system is a little bit, clunkier, it's got a lot of, grind to it, but Mass Effect 2 is pretty much just a shooter with the RPG elements kind of
Oh,
folded in. So
wow.
it's like, if I were to recommend one to you, I would say Mass Effect 2 for that reason, is I think that you would enjoy the combat in that way more than the
But
first one.
how big of a deal is your saves from the different ones as you're playing? Like, would it be better for me in 2 if I had played through 1 with that save file? Because I heard they
They
interact.
do carry some things over, but what they end up doing is there's a couple of decisions that they make for you, and then there's other
Oh.
ones that they kind of narratively say like, "Hey, during this mission, what can you tell me what happened?" And it's like you get to choose which option you would have chosen if you played the previous game, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah, that's okay. So, yeah, a little bit of that, but nothing, I guess, critical.
Yeah. No, you wouldn't be missing much.
So then, that begs the question with, circling back to Gundam, is Gundam due for some sort of RPG? Because right now, currently, I think the games are more based around here's a system or a mechanic that exists in gaming. Let's do a Gundam version of that. Or, there's the Gundam Breaker. But
Right.
but what something that is not necessarily about the almost like that old MS Dawn or whatever it was called. It's like it's not about the
Yeah.
combat, but it's about being in the world and the storytelling. Because it reminds me of when I played that new RoboCop game. I don't like those games
Right.
but I like RoboCop, so I felt like I was in that world, and I think I would appreciate a Gundam game if, let's say, yeah, it wasn't about the combat, but that wasn't its point. The point was, here's like a RPG story. Um, I don't know.
I I think that it's possible to make it work, and I think you could probably get away with doing a little bit of both. I think that like the 0081 is a good example of that kind of it's almost kind of RPG like, and you get that same sensation of building your squad, and you can like assign
That's
mobile
true.
suits to your wingmen and things like that.
Well, yeah, that brings up a good point because that is true. If I think about the Gundam games in general, they really do focus on story anyway. Other than Gundam Evolution, there's usually a story that the game has taken its time letting you know, even if I do skip it. In the
Well,
other,
and it helps, part of the problem is that so few of the games that are story driven in Gundam were never translated into
oh
English.
yeah,
So
that's a
that's
very good point. Yes, where yeah, we get a lot of that if you play the SD G Generation Genesis. That's a way to kind of get the story.
mhm,
But sometimes too when I'm playing a game that if let's say the combat mechanics aren't that great, I think Infinite Wealth, that Like a Dragon is a good example where it's not that it's a bad combat system. It's just it's not. I don't have to engage at all times, so I can chill and play. So I think maybe Gundam could use a chill and play game where that might be another way to get more people into Gundam. Let's say there's people that would be into model building and Gunpla, but they don't want to learn to fight in the game, but they wouldn't mind some turn-based, non-tactical, but more of the JRPG style.
yeah, yeah, maybe, like, even one of these idle RPGs that are so popular right now. I swear, like, as I'm scrolling Instagram, I get, like, 30 ads for new idle RPGs, like, for mobile games. I'm like,
Yeah, because I know the idle thing's pretty big. Like, there's this.
I
It's
don't
like
understand the appeal.
yeah, yeah. I don't know where it comes from. There's these virtual pet simulators. I think in Roblox, my son plays, and then he downloaded an auto clicker. So he'll set up the mouse to auto click so he can train his pets up all the way.
Oh, that's funny.
It's pretty funny. Yeah, those yeah, what's interesting because there's like idle games. I've played a couple of them in the past, and they're fun, but then there comes a point to where I feel like it's almost like empty calories.
Yeah. That's a
where
good
it's
way of
like,
describing it.
yeah, it's like I'm getting this intake, but I'm not getting I don't feel like I'm really being fulfilled. Yeah,
Yeah. And I don't I think there's a big sort of gap in the market for a Gundam video game that isn't competitive. Because I feel like the most popular Gundam titles right now are Gundam Versus and GBO2, and both of those are essentially PvP games.
you know what? That's a really good point you bring up that I want to talk about real quick. And I was kind of thinking about this when I did my last Blue Gamer video, but it's like GBO2, I think, appears more popular than it is. And I think it's
Right.
because it has that small dedicated following, which almost, even to me sometimes it makes me think if they wanted to make a competitive PvP Gundam game, the next one that's going to be mass appeal, or it it can't really play like GBO2. It
No.
Even
No.
though because they're supporting it for so long, it makes me think, oh, this is popular. This is what people want.
Yeah.
But if you look at the numbers, it's not what people want. But then again, I appreciate it. It's like, wow, that's cool on Bandai to just keep this going because
Yeah.
obviously it's good. Like for people like me that I appreciate game mechanics, like that's a good game. And then I was thinking, like the more recent Star Wars Battlefront games, they in some ways dumbed down the games. Like there's no land to air,
Right.
for instance, and so it makes me think like yeah, if a Gundam game was if they were going to come out with a PvP mass sort of marketed Gundam game, which that's what my dream is, like a Battlefront 2. I
Yeah.
think the combat would be more simplistic. It might be like Y switches your two guns and then left trigger to aim.
Exactly. Pretty much.
Yeah,
And then the other thing is you'd have to remove the gotcha element because I think part of what
yeah,
holds GBO2 back from the sort of mass appeal is that it really can't be an esport because nobody has the same roster. So,
yeah,
like, you know, what and that's the thing about, like, Battlefront or, RIP Gun Evo. At least Gun Evo had a fixed roster of, like, everyone has
right.
access to the same things, and so when you have a competitive match, everyone has the same tools, and so you can't say, like, "Well, you only won because you have this suit or you're playing that
Oh,
meta."
which is
You know what
pretty
I
much
mean?
all of GBO2 talk.
Yeah, that's
In Talos is saying something here I totally agree with. How he's saying a PVE GBO2 would be more popular.
yes,
Especially co-op. And I would agree with. In that reminds me, that was something they added into Battlefront 2. They added this 4-player co-op where you're on the map and you have your allies with you, their AI digital, but you feel like you're in the battle. And
exactly.
man, that's all and those graphics
And
that you
isn't that
have.
what Helldivers is essentially?
Yeah, exactly. Helldivers is taking that formula, but making it work today, I guess, with the more sensibilities of today with the battle pass and all that. Although I will say, the more I'm playing Helldivers, the more I'm liking it, but I feel like and it could be this. I don't think and I think they've admitted this. They didn't think the battle pass system to the degree of the people playing it because it has very limited stuff and the same stuff refreshes. You could buy everything and already be done, but that's kind of okay. It's like the gameplay is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So um yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else game wise because I know I'm still working on that 3DS Gundam game. In fact, I put that on hold since I beat Order of Ecclesia and started Portrait of Ruin. But yeah, I got to get back to that.
Yeah, and I picked that game up too, and it is absolutely fantastic. I love that thing.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just it's one of those where it almost looks like it would be like a good sort of skeleton to use in a game dev environment. Like, okay, I want to make a Gundam game. Here's this sort of base where it's like well designed models of the mobile suits. The maps are just clear, and the lighting system looks good for.
mhm.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Um, okay, so next up, so there's Gunpla, there's Robot Spirits. It's funny how Robot Spirits aren't really talked about a whole lot other than me, and then there's a couple others out there, but um,
There's a small dedicated, like, just fan club of robot spirits, but it's not
yeah,
widely talked about by content creators.
I know, and that's what's weird about it because it seems like they're popular enough to keep coming out with obscure stuff. So they just recently did the Blue Destiny. So if you check my videos you haven't seen yet, I did a review of the Blue Destiny and the Ifrit Custom. But then they have like the other ones coming out, the Blue Destiny Unit 2 and 3. But then they just announced too that Yukajima's GM command from the guinea pig team, which is neat because that's
Pretty cool.
while that is part of, yes, Blue Destiny, you would think the flagship stuff would be the BD1 to the Ifrit. But making that GM command, I think is pretty cool because I think they already made a GM command. So it could just be they're reusing it, which is cool.
Yeah, probably so. But,
But
I mean, I don't mind that because it's like they did the same sort of thing with, like, 8th MS team, didn't they? When
yeah. Yeah, oh, it was when you buy the ground or the ground Gundam, it came with the sticker to make it Shiro's. So then you would
Yeah.
buy another one so you didn't put the sticker on, and then um so the other one, what was I thinking? There was, yeah, the Blue Destiny, um and I think that eh, I'm wondering, is there other suits from Blue Destiny that would be something unique? So we've got the Ifrit. I don't know if they had any other like Xeon suits that were more.
Um,
I can't
the
think off the
n
top of my head.
I mean, that Ifrit custom was definitely the big one.
And the rest
I
were
guess you
Zaku 2s or
yeah,
GMs or Zaku
and then I guess you've got the BD2 and BD3.
yeah, those are coming out this summer. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I love that they do this in the Robot Spirits line where it's like they kind of hammer out one whole sort of story. So, like, for a while it was
oh
all the
yeah,
8th MS team story suits, and, like, now they're going through Blue Destiny.
I know.
Can you speculate on, like, what would probably be their next lineup?
So yeah, they got the Zeta coming out. So I think what they're doing is they have like their main line and then sub like right next to it. And so if let's say by the time Zeta starts coming out, they're going to be finishing up Blue Destiny. So alongside Zeta, it might have to be something like 0081 or even
Have they already done Rise from the Ashes? Like,
so
the
that's a
White Dingoes?
that's a good one because they did the sniper, but that's
They
it.
did
So that would be a good one because they have a new sniper body. Yeah,
and
Johnny
a lot of
Decuma
those
bringing
are
up Pale Rider.
yeah, a lot of the stuff from, Rise from the Ashes is just recolors anyway, so it's not like there's
Yeah, it would be nice though. And
yeah, I'd love a Vish Donahue Gelgoog, like
so did you know there's a Shin Matsunaga Zaku too,
yeah.
Robot Spirits. It's super expensive. That would be so yeah, that's kind of where I was getting at. Like, I like the idea of them coming out with like the hero suits. Because yeah, Tal was talking about Yukajima's Jagan would
Oh, yeah.
would be good because they just came out with a model kit for that.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I felt really embarrassed because I wanted to get the Vincent Gleisner, kit of the Gyaradoga, the
oh
blue
yeah.
Gyaradoga that you use in side stories, and someone was like, "Why don't you just get resins?" It's the exact same kit, they come with all the same parts. It's just
Same
one
colors?
says Resin Snyder and one says Vincent Gleisner. Like, they're both blue.
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
they're the exact same thing. Oh.
They might be different shades of blue, but as far
Oh.
as I can tell, like, they come with all the same accessories and stuff, so it's like, well, then,
Oh, okay.
save
That's
yourself a couple bucks, don't get the Gleisner one, just get the the
yeah.
resin.
Yeah, that's actually pretty neat because sometimes when I'm trying to fill like a collection or a group of things, if they don't have the Robot Spirits version, I'd want to get the Gunpla, or vice versa. So, anyway, excited to see what else they come out with in that line. It's an expensive line. I feel like it would take years to complete a collection, and then I even look back and I'm like, I don't have room. I
Yeah. They announced a P-Bandai one, which was what was it? It was like the full armor, Delta or something like that?
Oh, yeah, that's right. The Delta Chi. So, yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah, which is interesting because there's not a Hyakushiki,
Yeah.
and then they came out with the mass production version, and now they came out with this full armor version. But I just want the standard
Just
Hyakushiki,
give me a
which
Yakushiki.
I
Um,
I have the is it MS in Action or that other line? I forget, which is pretty nice. It's actually let me grab it real quick.
Is it like the universe one?
Oh, where's the camera?
Oh, I love the color on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. It kinda has that metallic look, but it's not too much, and I love the real tight markings even, like, on the side there,
That
the
is an
back.
excellent touch.
Yeah, it's a really, really nice one. That's why I haven't, like, there is a Robot Spirits version, but it's kinda the older molds, um but no, anyway, yeah, I was looking at what was on P Bandai, and I always find it interesting how much F90 stuff they push. It's like
I know.
it's like, "We get it. You guys like F90. What is F90?" You know?
Right.
Um, but I will say they look cool, and then there's this F90 N type, which I haven't set up my screen to share, so sorry, everyone. There's this F90 N type that looks fantastic. It looks like a cool looking Gundam, and it has a flight mode.
Now is this the whole Gundam, or is it just one of the packs? Because I know, like, all
It's
of
the
the
whole one. It's
alphabet.
actually, yeah, it's a master grade
Okay.
N type,
Because
which is the first time I heard of an N type.
oh, they have, like, the whole alphabet for the F90. There's, like, the
Oh,
A pack,
really?
B pack, C pack, so if
Yeah.
they've got an N type, then,
Oh,
man, they're
wow. Wow. Yeah. Well, this one has a flight mode, and I love that stuff. So
oh, yeah.
I don't know. I might pick it up. $62 though. That's kind of
Mm,
high up there for. That's around. Oh, it actually has fin funnels too. That's weird. I might have
yeah.
to. Too bad I'm not sharing my screen, or am I? Let me check.
I mean,
Oh,
the F90 does have a kinda cool design. I like I was it like the F92? It's not F92, it's like F90 space 2. That's like the purple body instead of the blue.
oh, that's right. I
Um,
have seen that. They even have like the mobile suit ensemble versions. Okay, I just shared to you, Steven, so you should be able to see.
yeah.
But like it looks cool. This has like it like looks like a UC Gundam, but like future enough. If we're trying to think, post CCA. Let's see.
Yeah, probably a couple meters shorter than your standard Gundam.
Yeah. Um,
Uh,
it-
Johnny Tacoma is asking me in chat, what do I think of the Zeta 2? I'm a fan of the Z2, the one that, Travis Kirkland was a pilot of.
let me pull that up. This one right here.
That's the one, yeah.
I mean, yeah,
I
that
think it's
looks
pretty
cool.
sweet looking. I mean, that is what the full armor Zeta should look like to me. But, like, if you look at, like, the full armor Zeta, it's just kinda goofy looking. It's like
I
yeah,
don't think I've
it's
seen that because I know I've seen like the. Oh wow, that looks.
yeah, that looks to me more like Chobham armor.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that does look like. That is pretty cool though. Like that's super obscure,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Those are some deep cuts.
There's not even like a and see that looks like the Z2, even though this is in the huh. I wonder if sometimes it gets confused, or people get confused by yeah, it looks like Choban armor. That looks great. That would be a great kit. I can't believe that doesn't exist. Although, what is going on with Zeta? Because it's not even in the roster for Gundam Breaker 4, right?
I mean, is it not in the roster, or is it just not one of the pre-order sort of benefits? I'm sure they're not gonna exclude the Zeta from the roster, I'm sure.
Unless someone was, unless I saw a truncated list, because I remember looking at a list that was showing all the mainline series and each one from the main line, and it skipped Zeta. It went from um, Mobile Suit Gundam to Double Zeta, I think.
That'd be wild. I
Oh,
mean,
that's
I'd
right.
cancel my pre-order.
The Mark II is available at the start,
Okay. Cool, cool.
which I really like that. But I think that's okay. Yeah, Talus is saying it is in the roster, but it's just the Mark II is available.
Yeah.
Start.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that
I do
seems like
find that kind of annoying sometimes where, you only get the Titans version of the Mark II. So, like, I think in GBO2,
yeah.
you only get the Titans version. You can recolor it into AUG colors, but I feel like they're slightly different because the AUG one does not use the Vulcan pod.
Oh, so is that the difference? Because okay, so that's interesting. That Vulcan pod, sometimes I don't know if it should be on or not because like it's like I don't remember seeing it, but then I see shots where it has it. So like the master grade comes with it. Um yeah, even my robot spirits one, but I never leave them on. But yeah, what would be the difference between the two? And that would seem like I know I'm asking a lot of questions. That would seem like it would be an obvious one in GBO2 to have like an AU version and maybe it has a different loadout or something.
Yeah, I mean, because I love when you have variants of a mobile suit that have different roles. Like, so, like, you have the Zeta, which is a general, and then you have the Hyper Mega Launcher Zeta that's a
Oh,
support.
yeah.
So it's like, how cool would it be if the Titans Mark II was a raid, but the AU Mark II was a general or something like that?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, they do have like the Super Gundam version, right? With the
Right.
which
Yeah.
maybe that's what they were going for, but
And I
yeah,
think it's the same thing in Gundam Versus, like the one that you and I
oh yeah.
played that's like, 'cause you can play as the Mark II as I think like Emma or Camille or
Mhm.
even Jared, but it's only the Titans one.
Yeah, that
And
is
then they
very
have the
interesting.
Super Gundam, but like not the AU Mark II.
So it's almost like behind the scenes, Bandai has established the differences. Standard Mark II is Titans colors, and if it's AU, gets a Super Gundam.
Pretty much.
That's
It's
okay.
like
Which that's not bad. I mean, I have a Verka Mark II um, robot spirits with the Super Gundam pack on it, like set
nice.
up. So maybe that's just, huh? Yeah, that's the default. I mean, I just love the Mark II is a great suit. Um, and then Talos is saying in Gundam versus the AU Mark II actually has the option to unequip the defender while in game. Yeah, that's right. I think
That's
Talos
pretty
taught me
cool.
that.
The ability to like purge it. That's pretty
Yeah,
sweet. I like that.
yeah, no, I do too. No, it's very cool. All right. Well, yeah, we're at 2:42, and you know what? I ran out of topics unless we can come up with something real quick or anyone in chat wants to bring up something. Just been kind of a yeah, slow Gundam time. Oh, you know what? I
What's
totally
that?
forgot something. I was supposed to start the show with the voice acting of Garrett from Afterward, and I totally forgot. I forgot to do the research.
Yeah.
That's what I
You know,
need
it's
to.
funny, I was actually, uh, as part of a project that I'm working on, I was watching some Gundam X, and I was like, "I'm not even sure I could do that voice." Like, it's, because I was trying to kind of practice it, and I was like, "You know what? I think that this is just coming off as me pretending to speak Japanese
Yes.
without knowing what I'm saying."
Yeah. No, no, exactly, because it's the consonant vowel sort of structure to where it's just you're kinda yelling. It's almost like you're trying to yell in that pitch.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So that'd probably be an impossible task. Maybe that's why I didn't get to it. But, and then, I think Robert brought something up earlier, which we could, speaking of voices and stuff, it's interesting that what's cool in, the Gundam Breaker 4, they're gonna have the English dub going on, which is pretty neat.
So I
Yeah.
was talking to Ultronymous about this because at first on Twitter I responded to that and I was like, "Hey, I would love if Keith Silverstein reprised his role as Char slash Quattro slash Full Frontal." But then I thought about it and I was like, "Wait a second. There are no Gundam characters in Gundam Breaker.
Right.
It's
Yes.
only going to
That's
be like build
okay.
characters." Like I don't
Okay.
understand. Yeah, like,
Oh,
everyone's getting excited, like, "Oh, man, we're gonna get to hear Judo's voice, and we're gonna get to hear so and so's voice," and I'm like, "I don't think we are, because it's a breaker
yeah.
game, it's
You're
not."
exactly right. Wow, mind blown. Mind blown. Yeah, it seems like it's gonna be so that's the thing. This is something I don't know if in Gundam Breaker 1, 2, and 3, there were consistent characters. Like that, I don't know. Like in 3, I think I made a character anyway.
Yeah,
So I wonder if this is taken after the Gundam Breaker Mobile, where it's like a real, like, maybe story driven with these characters, or what if they're going to change it around and maybe do it where on the battlefield when you're fighting they're going to make it where it's being piloted by characters from that universe. um
that would be kinda cool, um,
yeah, because that's a really good point. I did not even think about that.
but yeah, I mean, how many years can you be in high school in these Gundam Breaker games? Like, eventually, you have to
Yeah,
graduate and go to Gundam Breaker College.
so unless what they're saying is it has an English dub, but it's not like any sort of okay, Gundam Breaker 4 is taking place beyond Battlelog and mobile, the recent OVA. So yeah, it must be completely new, different characters where they didn't have to like worry about it matching any type of voice or script or anything.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we're getting characters from even the short anime. So okay, so maybe get some characters from that. So that's probably what makes that doable.
Right. Yeah.
That explains a lot more now because this game was delayed and Battlelog came out with just like 4 episodes last year, just and there's nothing supporting it. And I think this is what it was supposed to coincide with.
Yeah.
It
And I
reminds me,
wonder if those kits that came out for Battlelog were supposed to be associated with GB4, and
yeah,
so now they have this new Strike custom that honestly, that's the best thing to have come out,
yeah,
as part of this is the pre-order kit because that
I
thing is
know.
sweet.
It looks so 90s. But yeah, so that's interesting then. About it would be cool. Yeah, let's see how this turns out. I'm hoping this does something with Gundam. I'm just really looking forward more to what they're doing the Requiem for Vengeance because it's Unreal Engine 5. Like, I feel like by now, soon, is it the announcement of Gundam Breaker 4 will then kind of delay any further announcements? But I believe so. There's going to be a network test coming soon, and then I believe the game's probably going to come out in August. That just seems like the right time frame for all this. So, does that mean they're not going to announce anything until then? Or I would think they would at least announce some series or show to come out in the summer or movie.
I would
Um,
hope so, we might get the surprise Hathaway 2 drop.
I know, right? And that's another thing. I wonder if with how well this Seed Freedom is doing, that might make them think about their plans, maybe delay, push a bit. Since now they're doing that screening in Singapore. Who knows if they decide to do that in the U.S. It seems like that would be a thing. And I wonder if
Yeah.
they're going to try to focus on that while GBO4 then gets released, and then so anything else Gundam would be after that. Because there was that rumor that it wasn't confirmed, but Requiem for Vengeance would be October.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't found any other confirmation of that besides just I think it was, like, in some random article that
Yeah,
someone linked to you,
yeah,
um, but that would be pretty sweet, and since it's in Unreal, it would be kinda cool if you got the Requiem for Vengeance suits in Gundam Breaker 4, even though
yeah.
they don't necessarily fit the art style. I mean, just retexture them, just like,
Yeah, I'm
give
sure
them that
they'll
cartoony look and then plug them in.
I feel like they have to, because I think the Gundam games have always been good about DLC, whether you
Yeah.
like to pay for it or not. I think they've always been good about releasing things like even SD Gundam Battle Alliance. It had like the Hathaway suits come out near the end, and then the bonus switch for Mercury DLC, which wasn't originally planned,
Right.
and then they added that in. So, yeah, it would be really cool and that's something with Gundam Breaker 4 when oh yeah, and this is something I meant to talk about at the beginning of the show and I totally forgot. So
There we go. It always comes back to video games.
it does. It does. So I heard this through watching other YouTubers. Talos has been covering this also, and Red with Vion. But in the Gundam Breaker 4 game, it works where if you mash a single button multiple times, it reduces the impact. So the game is teaching you to do different attacks.
So it's
That is what
kind
I
of
was hoping to get out of a game,
yeah,
like this. So that actually sounds more promising to me, where the game is building more of an interchangeable combo based system.
which, I like that as a mechanic because, in tabletop, I always love, diminishing returns. So, like, for instance, the more often or, like, the higher skill you get at something in a tabletop game, it's always nice if it becomes harder to level that skill up because you have
Yeah.
gotten to a point where you're kind of at the peak of it. I wish that it were a more positive spin. I think I've talked about there's a couple of video game YouTubers that I follow that talk about ways like different mechanics in order to train the player to play the way you want them to. And if you punish a player for not playing the way they want you to, which is what this kind of sounds like, it's not as fun as if you reward them for playing the way you want them to.
That's a
So like
really good point. Yeah.
the
We've
the
talked about that. Yeah, I feel like
yeah,
it's one of your tenets of game design.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, I think that it's a philosophy that you appreciate well because you're such
Yeah.
a positive guy, like, you
Oh, yeah.
know,
Positive
it
reinforcement. Yeah.
right. It's honey and vinegar over here.
No, but
But, yeah, like Doom, they reward you with health for going in for the melee
yeah.
kills, right? So, like, I think that if you had either maybe you had a higher percentage of getting break parts when you switch up your combo attacks as opposed to getting diminishing damage, you can it trains you to fight harder and get more tactical with your approach without punishing you for not doing that.
And I wonder how much maybe what they said is the translation. So maybe when we play, we realize there is more of a positive output, to that. But yeah, it's reminding me of Castlevania and Dark Souls when I'm leveling and sometimes I'm maxing a certain stat, and it gets to a point to where it takes more XP to max
Yeah,
that stat. But if that's the only barrier, a lot of times there's a way where you can farm XP. Um,
exactly.
so I like the idea though of like, okay, you're just maxing strength, but hey, if you start working on intelligence too, you can add some magic buffs to your strength. I don't know. Like I feel like those systems could work better with each other, just in terms of games that I play. Like I feel like Castlevania and Souls have like the same leveling system, and while some things work together, it just really dependent on the weapon. But it would be really neat if they really made it. And I think thinking about it, like Elden Ring does a good job of that, where you can start maxing certain things for certain weapons. But a lot of times, then in those games, you're then just focused on that, and you can't really change your gameplay up too much unless you decide to go off the track and then start grinding. Like there needs to be a more cohesive way to introduce trying different mechanics while you can experiment with using mechanics together. Um,
I see what you're saying. And that's something that, like, a lot of games tend to be grindy because they assume that you're trying to level up all of your stats, where I think
oh
what
yeah.
would be a more fun and engaging way of designing a game would be to say, maybe you have certain types of character builds you can do like you do in a Souls game or like in Elden Ring, and doing the bare minimum, you can max out one skill, but you're only gonna be able to max out that one. So it's not that you're grinding to max out one skill, you're getting just the bare minimum to get that one. To do everything else, you're not gonna have the ability to do that just playing the game. So it's like, I don't know, I feel like that would be a way of encouraging replays because then it's like, well, now I wanna go back and play it, but, like, with this build, but I don't feel like I have to grind to get that build, it's just I'm going to enjoy the game
Oh,
and
playing that way.
playing that build. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I feel like that is probably the good base to work off of, and then try to figure out how to mold the systems to then sort of take advantage of that more. Like sometimes you don't know if something is an easy button or not. Like how some games are like, yeah, you can go in and undo all your stat points and change them to something else. And then sometimes like, okay, is that like an easy mode for me? Or is that no, that's just a way to enjoy the game a different way. But then yeah, again, I always feel like I think there's room for games to evolve the XP point stat system, whereas I think most games do it the same. And I
Yeah.
think I've seen the most variety from board games you've brought up, where I'm like, wait a minute, they could just do that in a video game, you know? And yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see some of those systems adapted into a video game.
Well, and here's an example because what if you're playing a game and one of the functions is you have to roll a dice first before you could play? But your dice, maybe you can level up its turn speed, its weight, how far you can throw it. What if there's ways you can manipulate the system that dictates how battles turn out, And I'm just using the dice as an example. It wouldn't be literally that, but like what if as you're playing a game you can wear certain clothing or drink certain potions that then will aid in leveling specific things? And it's
Yeah.
like and maybe there you can only use them a few times, you know?
Well, and so Skyrim does this, right, where it's like, in order to level up certain skills, you have to actually use that skill, right?
Oh,
So it's
yeah,
like, the more often you
yeah.
use your sword, the better you get
Like,
with
if you
your
jump all
sword.
the time, you become a good
Yeah.
jumper.
And so people can kinda spam the system that way. So
Yeah.
one of the tabletop mechanics that I came up with is that you only gain XP in a skill when you fail rolls in that skill. So
Hmm.
imagine if in Skyrim, you only got better at using your sword when you miss. Leveling up early game is gonna be super easy because you're gonna be missing a lot, but then, as you get to late game and you've gotten so good that, like, you're hitting constantly, it becomes much harder to level up because you get this diminishing return on how often you're going to be missing with your
That's actually pretty interesting. Yeah, because, yeah, that might make you think about well, and it's part of the learning then, like, if you're having to learn how to use a certain weapon, and at first you're not gonna be that good at it, but maybe you're then by trying it out and doing bad at it, you're making it more powerful. Like, let's say that is the stat. It just levels up how powerful it is. So if you're really good with a weapon, it doesn't matter how powerful you are. It's like
yeah.
a Souls game. I like where you're going with this.
Yeah,
There's got to
and
be
you know what? It's a good life lesson because I think any skill that you try to pick up, you're gonna suck at it at first. Like, everyone who tries to draw, like, you suck at
oh
drawing, you're
yeah,
gonna do stick
of course.
figures, but you have to kinda fight through the suck in order to get better.
Yeah, and I feel like that's almost like a built-in sort of difficulty system for people that are just really good at those games are really bad, you know, and it almost kind of goes in line with that thing you told me about in Tears of the Kingdom, where it's seeing what level of enemy you've defeated. So as you travel, it's different enemies, and I bet that could probably play a part. It reminded me of like Bloodborne, because Bloodborne, until you get killed, you don't go to the level up area,
Yeah,
and I think that's kind of a neat thing too.
I thought that that was a brilliant way of teaching you that, like, you're supposed to fail in
Yeah.
order to, like, get better.
I want to keep this in mind when we're talking about games we want to make where we can implement this system that is it's almost like creating a dynamic difficulty, but also it tunes to people's play style, you know,
Yeah,
like um yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. Well, okay, so I think that's it for today's episode. This was great. I like there was that scare at the beginning, like all everything was gonna fail, but no, it was all good and had good discussion despite limited news. You know, a lot of times you're just talking about freedom over and over until until Breaker comes out, and then we'll talk about that over and over.
yeah, there you
Um,
go.
but yeah, if you guys haven't, check the links in the description for like Steven's show. If you haven't watched it yesterday, we had a lot of fun there. That was good.
Yeah,
Um,
where we
and
have
then,
physical difficulties instead of technical ones.
oh yeah, that was funny. That was funny. Yeah, you guys got to watch that beginning part to see what happened. And then the cat just came to say hi. All right. So yeah, that just about does it. So everyone have a good weekend, have a good week, and we will talk later.
Cheers.